Hello, I'm Professor Julie Davies, Professor of Healthcare Management and Leadership Development at Brunel University of London, and this is a talk for Ahlia University, Bahrain, for its 17th doctoral symposium, looking at theorizing and the Gioia method, moving from data to concepts. There are two learning objectives from this session. First of all is the process of theorizing and how important that is to explain it. And secondly, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using the Gioia method template to move from raw data to conceptualization with various dimensions of a theoretical framework. This is a quick warm-up for you to consider perhaps when you're feeling a little bit demotivated or tired with your PhD or doctorate in business administration or any doctorate. It can be very energizing to read other people's acknowledgements. So here's an example, and maybe if you haven't already started one, perhaps you should do that at some point. So here, who are you going to thank for your guidance from your supervisors and others in the community? Who gave their time to help you in your research? And what about your friends and family and the impact of your doctoral studies going forward? So ultimately, the product of a PhD or any other doctorate is not a certificate or a dissertation. It's about you as a person and how you develop a particular mindset. So this is taken from Vita's research development framework, and it looks at you in the center as the researcher, the research you're doing, and the networking, the research communities you're engaging in debates and contributing to. So today we're going to look at a particular aspect of doing research, and that is the knowledge, the capabilities of research methods, critical thinking and creativity and innovation, using the Gioia method particularly to focus on. So what is it about your knowledge and skills that you're going to take away well beyond this particular thesis? And what communities are you talking with? And as you prepare for your Viva, there are killer questions, I guess. So a potential killer question is, what is your contribution to theory? And also unpacking how you show the process of moving from raw data to interpretations, your findings and discussion. They don't just pop out of the hat like a rabbit with a magician. You actually show the process of getting there. So Bacharach defined a theory as a statement of relations among concepts within a boundary set of assumptions and constraints. This contrasts with theorizing, which is a process, so not just a statement, but a process of sense-making, going from raw data, abstracting, explaining. It can be very iterative and messy, and you do this, you learn by doing. So theory is the outcome and theorizing is the process. Famously, Kurt Lewin said there's nothing as practical as a good theory. It's not just an abstract concept, but it helps to identify how and why things work and enables you to be more targeted in terms of suggesting recommendations and actions that are efficient and effective. And I always like to remind people that there are two kinds of dissertations. One that's in your head that may be perfect, and one that's actually submitted. So there is only one, and it's a finished one and submitted. So while you need to be thoughtful, you can't be too precious. So this book, Surviving Your Dissertation, argues that you should argue. Your task is to build an argument, not a library. So if I ask you what your method is, I want to know exactly what it is. So to take the analogy of cooking, if you made baked beans on toast last night, and I ask you today, what was your method of producing, what's your recipe for producing this outcome? We don't expect a whole summary of a cookery book. We want to know the processes of how you achieved the outcome. So the literature is obviously very important in informing the methodology. and the theorization, the questions should be mapped onto the theoretical concepts. So it's a huge struggle if you end up with a lot of data and you don't have a framework to make sense of that data. So Bell et al. In the Business Research Methods text talks about linking the methodology and the theorizing to the literature. So what do you already know about this topic? What concepts and theories are relevant? What research methods and strategies have you employed to make sense of this topic? What are the debates, the major controversies, inconsistencies in your findings and other people's findings? And what unanswered questions in this area is your research going to address? So of course we can unpack other people's theories, apply their theories, but it's also useful to build theory or extend theory. Or in different contexts, what happened before the pandemic, pre-Google, may be very different from an age of AI. So certain theories need to be revisited. So we need to build theory to help us with meanings, understand processes and social dynamics, show how theories have developed historically. Over time, there are various fashions. For example, trait theory may have been very popular at one time. Then you go beyond looking at leaders to looking at leadership, and then to looking at followership, and then maybe traits come back. So we need to move beyond just describing and actually generalizably come up with ideas that happen across contexts and time, in terms of temporality, and build emergent theory and identify how we, through our research, confirm existing theory, extend it, or problematize it, and how we move from the findings of everyday management practice to conceptualizing management practice. So we want to, rather than just cite and describe, we want to contribute in some way to tweaking and extending theory. This requires then engaging critically with existing theories and locating your work. So if you have a table, adding an extra table potentially of how your outputs relate to previous outputs. So what is the landscape theoretically? What are the key concepts, assumptions, debates? How do they relate to each other, and how has a field matured over time? What are the gaps, inconsistencies, blind spots? And this can help you question your assumptions and methodologies to provide new approaches. And also locate your interventions in the literature in relation to those challenges. So it's useful when you're writing to consider what are the most relevant theories to your research, how have these shaped your research questions, and importantly, are you making any novel contribution by extending the theory in some way, digging deeper into one or two dimensions or concepts, and how theories relate to each other, similar theories drawing on each other, and importantly, how you can answer that killer question, what is your contribution to theory? So you need to be systematic and rigorous in this. Potentially look at the managerial or theoretical problem. What are the issues with the theories? Look at the advantages and disadvantages within different dimensions and constructs. Look at the relationships between them. So the carrot and stick theory, what is the relationship between the carrot and motivation? To what extent does giving people carrots or punishments motivate them, and at what point is it demotivating that they don't try at all? So you need to link various management theories, look at the different contexts, the boundary conditions, the actors, the organizations, bring this together into ideally a visual of some kind of figure, and then look at how it can contribute to current management practice and also future. Here is an example within a relatively immature field that's developing, business and society. So Crane and colleagues have talked about theories having the potential to explain a phenomenon. Good theorization would aim at explanations that are in some way generalizable. So theory helps us to categorize and rise above individual quotations to look at overarching phenomena. And here are some kind of very traditional theories like contingency theory, resource-based view of the firm, social movements theory, institutional theory. And it's often quite useful to look at one field like sociology, anthropology, development economics, and see how that relates to the workplace. Here is a very specific example related to generative AI, looking at strategic human resource management frameworks and how those might be influenced by the current state of GAI. So they're re-evaluating human resource management frameworks in the context of artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence. So it takes existing theory of institutional entrepreneurship, which relate to seizing opportunities, aligned with business objectives, realigning and embracing a culture of continuous learning and adaptation. And then it looks at what's happening in practice between HR and GAI adoption. And it comes up with a particular model that stresses the importance of socioeconomic consequences and disciplinary differences, as well as multi-level research methodologies to understand perhaps old phenomena. To understand old phenomena in a new context, what is HRM through the general artificial intelligence lens, they come up with this particular model that you can see in the British Journal of Management. Okay, so I'm going to look at this particular method by Gioia and his colleagues, which is very popular and has been critiqued quite a lot recently, and how you go from large data sets, lots of data, perhaps from interviews, to a couple of themes linked to the theory that you're establishing. This data structure from Gawley and Gioia 2004 shows movement from the raw data, that's what respondents actually said, here listed under first order concepts, moving to kind of summaries of these concepts, categorizing them into second order concepts, and finally coming up with like 3 dimensions in this example. Here we've got triggers of identity, ambiguity, change context, and leadership responses to sense-giving imperative. The theoretical framework is shown in this diagram, where you've got in identity, ambiguity, and change following a corporate spin-off. At the beginning you've got pre-spin-off, and then at the end you've got post-spin-off identity. The first column is various triggers that have been gained from the data. In the middle you've got identity, ambiguity in terms of the triggers. And then on the right you have leaders' responses, 3 types of leader responses, like defining the future image, increasing branding efforts, and modeling behaviors. And to the left of that you have the 3 key points that came from the data structure in terms of sense-making imperative, change and overload, identity transitions. This table really summarizes the elements of the Gioia method, so how you design research, collect and analyze the data, and ground the interpretations in the actual voices of the respondents. Here's a summary of Gioia et al. 2013, arguing that the Gioia method is rooted in inductive interpretivist research. It's very much informant-centric, so it stems not from the words of the researcher initially, but from the informant's words. Then the researcher groups and comes up with their own concept, interpreting them, and finally you have a summary. So you move from data, concepts to theory. It's not just coding, it's not just putting labels, but it's actually linking to a theoretical model. The model, the approach to this method is very popular, and I guess it can be seen as very reductionist. So here's some examples of the limitations. It can be very formulaic, as I said, reductionist. Maybe false claims are made and it's just too neat. And there are circumstances where you may not use it at all. So where the informant's voice is not terribly critical, it's a highly critical or post-structural approach, and it's strongly deductive. So of course you can use other approaches. Most recently, Mears, Buss et al. Has critiqued the limitations of templates and this form of method to understand history, context, and identity. This is a quick summary of a current project we have, looking at resources, agency, achievement, and structural constraints amongst professional women in India in a context of state policy about Nari Shakti, which is women's led empowerment. Based on our literature review of this theory from development economics and Amartya Sen's concepts of freedom, as well as Joan Acker's inequality regimes, we've constructed these questions about individuals' career challenges, discrimination experiences, how they feel valued compared with their male counterparts, what they understand the term women's empowerment or women-led empowerment, Nari Shakti in India, means, what kind of support they've had in their careers from their families, colleagues, line managers, and how these have shaped their leadership and their aspirations, as well as their leadership style, various experiences of resistance to being a leader in a leadership position, and when hope prevailed over difficult situations, and what is going on currently in the workplace in relation to resources, agency, and achievement in terms of a context of AI. Using the Gioia method, we extracted key quotations from our interviewees. We clustered these into various themes, linked firstly to empowerment, secondly to choice was another key theme, and also human, social, psychological, material resources that supported choices and agency and outcomes. The second column looks at these aspects, and the third column summarizes the three key dimensions within the workplace that were generated from the data. And what was novel and interesting was a focus on entrepreneurship and activism, extreme sports and creative pursuits, where women were constrained in the workplace to get ahead and found outlets in non-work activities. And in some cases, they combined philanthropy and STEM disciplines and work in IT in a major companies, where they were able to combine both their passions as well as their professional interests, but mainly they couldn't. The following slides simply make the quotations visible and show how we code them according to different categories linked to the P code we gave by anonymizing each woman. We also color coded different sections, so this section is what people think about the term Nari Shakti, whether women should empower themselves, and activities that women did, such as volunteering. The third box here outlines a woman's view on the negative aspects of Nari Shakti. She calls it empty rhetoric, that women have enough to do, and Nari Shakti is a scam. So women saying yes to yet more things, and being judged about what they wear, how they talk, ultimately the issue is that women feel unsafe in society, and often other women, there's a sense of female misogyny. This article builds on work we've done looking at female physicians and inequality regimes and their careers, where we also used the Gioia method to analyse the data. In this case, we categorised 3 types of women. So some women who complied with the gendered norms they had to face and put their family first. This model finally summarises our overarching theoretical framework within that particular paper. So if you look at the bottom, the first category was family first, the second category was passion first. So some women pursued surgery despite huge opposition and entrepreneurship. The third simply accepted the inequities. And the fourth developed resilient competences to overcome these. And we've got macro, meso and micro level influences on these women's careers. This is the data structure underpinning the theoretical framework. So thank you for watching. Good luck with theorising and using the Gioia method.